Another exclusive live session with the Hype Magazine.
You need to stop what you're doing. Pay attention.
World famous Hype Magazine. Going down right now.
Hey, what's good, everybody? This is Jerry from the Hype Magazine. We're on the line today with the founder of Lava Records, Mr. Jason Flom. He is also a founding board member of the Innocence Project. And Jason just recently partnered with Revolver Podcast and is launching season 1 of his shows on September 1st called Wrongful Convictions. Hey, thanks for being with us today, Jason.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, man. So folks getting locked up, they're down for 20 years. Some folks on death row, a couple of them had their 2 or 3 last meals, et cetera, and they're getting exonerated or not. Talk to me about the Innocence Project and what it is that you're doing, Jason.
Well, so I've been involved with the Innocence Project for about over 20 years now, and I first became aware of it probably the same way some people are becoming aware of it right now listening to us, which was just by media, from the media. I saw a TV show or something about it, one of their cases, and I freaked out because I couldn't think of anything worse than being locked up in one of these horrendous prisons that we have in America for something you didn't do. And I realized that I had to do something about it. I don't see how anybody can see that type of injustice going on and not be motivated to want to help. So I called the Innocence Project, and at that time it was a brand new organization, so you could just get the founder on the phone, right? So I did, and I went and I met with them, and I became a founding board member, and it's been, my passion, sort of my calling in life ever since. And that's how this all started.
Mm-hmm.
Now today, it's been, like I said, 2 decades and hundreds of exonerations later, and I've gotten to know so many of these incredible men and women who have been through these crazy ordeals, serving, 35 years in prison or 40 or 10 or 4 or whatever it is, and then coming out the other side with a positive attitude and, hope and optimism and some joy even. And I'm like, wow, every time I meet one of these guys, I'm so inspired to want to do more. And that's where the idea from the podcast came from. And I know I'm rambling, but you can cut me off.
No, you're not rambling. That's great.
So I had this idea. I love people. I love interviewing people. I love radio. And I love the Innocence Project, and I love the people, the exonerees themselves. So I thought, what a perfect fit for me to be able to help them share their stories and talk about the issues surrounding their wrongful convictions, the causes, the systemic problems, and the fixes that we can put in place, and help them to tell their story, because I have personal relationships with these men and women, and so I'm able to get them to feel, I think, very comfortable, and to share details that are like, if these stories were in a movie, there would be somebody in the script department who would be like, or the editing department would be like, no, you got to take that part out. That's too crazy. Like, people aren't going to believe it, except it's real. Like, these are the real people who've been through the real stuff. I mean, I had a guy on last week named Doug Delosa, and his story makes Shawshank Redemption look like Mary Poppins, I'm telling you. It's so crazy that you just sit there and go, I don't know how you survived it. I mean, I can't imagine. And that's interesting too. That's one of the other guys I had on, Keith Allen Harwood. I had him on Monday. This is a guy who did 34 years in prison. He just got out for something he didn't do. And I said to him, I can't imagine. No one can imagine what you've been through. And he said, you know what? People say that to me, and the truth is, you really can't. And he said it in a very nice way, but it was like, how can anybody possibly imagine that if you haven't been there?
Yeah, that's true. I interviewed a couple of guys when I started the Dark American column. I interviewed 2 gentlemen who had been on death row. One of them had 3 last meals, and I I said, how do you imagine that you go from this space, they take you down the road 30 or 40 miles to a place where you know that you're going to go die, and you're in a holding cell, you're looking at the portal that you're going to walk through to go and have your life taken for something that you didn't do. I mean, the frustration, the hopelessness, the, what the fuckism, basically, that goes on in your mind. And then to have them pull you away. So now that you're prepared for death, and you've got that, and they pull you back. So now you got to you've gone through this multiple times. To have somebody, finally say, "Oh, I lied on the witness stand," and the prosecutor knew, and to have the prosecutor, it's like, it's crazy. It's like being in war. You can't come back to a therapist who's never been in Afghanistan, shot at, blown up, or whatever, and have them understand what it is that you feel. So
no, and it's interesting. I'm glad you raised that. Years ago, I started a thing called the Innocence Network Conference as part of the Innocence Project, and it's an incredible thing because the thought was, let's get these guys to all get together and form like a support group for each other. And so we did one in Chicago, the very first one. Then we did the second one in New York, in a school here that lent us their space. And we had about 50 or 70 of these guys come in. And we had a format where each one could get up and speak if they wanted to about what their life was like, what happened, what the challenges are now, what they're facing. And then we had events where they could socialize with each other. We had counselors there, employment experts, housing experts, people that, social workers, because there really is, and like I said, I'm glad you raised it, there's nobody else that can possibly relate to what they've been through except for somebody else who's been through the same thing. And they're incredibly supportive of each other for the most part. Sonny Jacobs, who is a dear friend of mine and who was sentenced to death, her husband was actually executed for double murder that they didn't commit, and before she was exonerated 16 years later. And she and her husband, who's also a death row exoneree, they have now founded a thing called the Sonny Center, where it's in Ireland, and they bring over newly exonerated people and help them learn life skills and help them with all the stuff that we're talking about. So this support is so critical because, again, and you talked about it. I mean, the idea of being like practically looking at the electric chair or whatever it is, or lethal injection right down the hall. But even short of that, just the idea of being locked up in an environment where you're in a cell that's the size of the bathroom of most of the people who are listening to us right now, right? And you're with somebody else, most likely, who may be a violent, crazy person, and you're dealing with loneliness, you're dealing with being pulled away from your family, you're dealing with horrible food, violence, possibility of rape, heat, right? I mean, there's been these articles recently about how some of these prisons in the South, it gets up to 105 degrees inside, and there's air conditioning, and nobody wants to give them air conditioning because they think that's like coddling criminals. And then you have, it's interesting, Michael Morton, who is exoneree from Texas, who served 25 years, he spoke about, I think I saw it on 60 Minutes, about how the most of all those terrible things, the horrible food, right, that they give you, he said that the noise is one of the most oppressive things, that it never stops. And that he said, the only time he felt he could get peace was by putting his radio on and turning it to static, put the headphones in, and then he could read or think better or whatever, because you can imagine that cacophony of noise, and then on top of all the other things, you're laying on a bunk that's made out of steel or concrete with a tiny little mattress. Maybe you have a pillow, maybe you don't. I mean, it's nuts what we do to people, and they don't do it like this in the rest of the civilized world. Like you see these things on TV, how in Germany or Scandinavia or Western Europe in general, most of the prisons in those places are focused on rehabilitation. And the prisoners are treated like people. They're treated like actual people. And I know in it's in Norway or one of those places in Scandinavia, the warden gives a speech in one of the prisons when you get in, and he says, listen, when you get out of here, you be my next door neighbor. And so I'm going to treat you the way I would treat my neighbor, and I expect you to treat me the same way, and we're going to get through this together. And, then they have I think all the guards sing a song at the beginning, and it's all crazy.
Oh, my God.
And here it's all, yeah, they do. You could look at it. If you pull it up on 60 Minutes, you'll see it's crazy. Or you could just look up Norwegian prisons online. I mean, it's crazy. People are going to see that and say, wait a minute, that looks nicer than my kid's dorm room in college. And it does. But, and that may be a different extreme, and I don't think America is ready for that. But this idea that being convicted of a crime should subject you to cruel and unusual punishment, including a lot of the things that we just talked about, is just wrong. It's just wrong. And I always say if another country treated our citizens the way we treat them, we would invade that country. We'd be like, sorry, motherfuckers, you cannot fuck with our people like that. You cannot lock up 2.3 million, mostly minorities. You cannot treat them in prison like they don't matter at all, like it's okay for them to be murdered or slashed or raped or whatever it is. No, that's not happening. We're going to invade your ass now until you know what I mean? But we do it all the time. It's like
all day, every day. And, the criminal justice system here is actually a big business, and prisoners are commodities that are traded on the stock exchange here. You know what I mean? So,
it is. I mean, the good news is I'm sure you saw that Obama recently, the Obama administration is phasing out the use of private prisons. So that's, but there's still a long way to go. That's the federal system. I mean, the states have to follow suits. The states have to follow suits. The immigration system, that hasn't been phased out yet either. And those places are the only places that are worse than the regular prisons. So, it's all horrible, and it needs to change, and it's gonna change. And I think the good news is there's a lot of very smart, very capable, very influential people who are all, there's a rising consciousness among that group of this problem, and there's a concerted effort among some really, people who can make a difference, who are, pushing the snowball up the hill, and it's going to change. It has to change.
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, it's our system here. It's crazy that the CAA, the Corporate Corrections Association of America, some bullshit. They've taken over and they administer our federal prisons. But the same people who are administering these prisons, are the ones lobbying for longer prison sentences because they make more money.
It's good for business for them.
Yeah, good for business, you know what I mean? But within the entertainment industry, several of the large music labels and organizations are majority shareholders in that federal system. And, it's
I did not know that.
Oh, yes. I wrote that article, and my publisher said, we can't publish this. It's like...
Well, you can send it to me, and I'll read it.
Oh, trust me, I'm going to now. You watch what I do.
I got to see that. I mean, but look...
I've got the data. Go ahead, talk to me.
For a while there, I stopped going to certain banks because I found that they had investments in the private prisons, and then I realized. Then I looked at the list and I saw they all do. I'm like, there's nowhere to bank. They all invested. But meanwhile, the stocks are plummeting. You saw they were down like 50% on the announcement of the Obama administration's move. So I was jumping for joy when I saw that, obviously. But there's, this is a huge problem, and it goes much deeper than just the private prisons or just the sentencing or just the wrongful convictions. I mean, our entire criminal justice system needs to be thrown out and started all over again. I often say that if you wanted to make America average among the nations of the world, in terms the civilized nations of the world, in terms of the number of people we lock up per capita, just average, you'd have to release 80% of the people in prison right now, today, and be like, yo, go home. We're tired of you. Don't go back to your family, go to church, go to school, whatever the fuck you're going to do, go to work. We're not keeping you around here anymore. So that means 1.8 million people would have to walk out of prison today and go home just to get us to be average, not progressive like you would hope that America would be, just average. So that's an incredible waste of human lives. And, of course, we know that the number one reason why children end up in prison is if they've had a parent in prison. And that's logical if you think about it, too. It's not race, it's not ethnicity, it's not education. It's whether or not they've had a parent in prison. So the cycle continues until we stop it. And we have to stop it because it doesn't work. It doesn't help. It doesn't keep crime down. It doesn't reduce anything. It doesn't have any positive effect on society. So, this policy is a failure. And it's, like I said, it's going to change because it has to change and because we're going to change it. And that's what we're going to do. But it's going to require people to, who are listening now, to have increased awareness and to take some action and write to their congressman or whoever their elected official is, and join the movement because it's just time when people don't want to live in a police state, and it's not. I mean, look, it extends out to so many things. Even you talk about like the sex offender registry, right, or things like that. It's all insane. We have 800,000-900,000 people on the sex offender registry where there probably should be 30,000, And as a result, you create this giant bureaucracy. You can't keep track of any of them because there's too many of them. And a lot of them are people who really didn't do anything. Like you could be on the sex offender registry for peeing outside.
Yes.
You could even do it on your own property. There's 24,000 people on the sex offender registry who were arrested when they were 12 or younger. 12. For doing something like that, peeing outside, having some other, something when they were kids, playing doctor, whatever the hell it is, and then you're
marked for life.
Insane, totally insane. Like there's people who are 17 and dating a 16-year-old. Now I'm not condoning any underage sex. I mean, anything like that. But I mean, there's got to be some, some sanity, like to then be marked for life for something that's consensual among two teenagers. I don't think so. I mean, but it's all part of this monstrous mistake that's been this over incarceration and over. It's like it's just a giant bureaucracy that's fed by human suffering, and that's what I'm trying to. So I'm just trying to do my part to help reverse that whole thing because I think a lot of people know somebody who's been caught up in this. I do.
Yeah.
I didn't when I started, but I do now. And I think if everybody just sort of puts yourself in their shoes and say, how would you feel, or put somebody you love in those shoes and go, well, it feels a little different now. But unfortunately, most people, listen, there's a lot of people involved in a lot of very good things, and there's a lot of very good causes.
Right.
But this one is, to me, the one that drives my passion. So it is what it is. By the way, I want to put a quick plug in. I post about this stuff on my Instagram and Twitter, which is @it's Jason Flom. So if anybody wants to follow me, I will make you laugh and I will make you cry. @it's Jason Flom. That's a commitment.
Awesome. Also, Wrongful Convictions. This is the name of the show, season 1.
Yes. By the way, can you hear me okay? Because you're a little staticky on my end, but you can hear me okay with that?
I can hear you just fine. I had to
okay, good.
move to a different location because it was too noisy. I'm actually out on tour. So I'm like, they were having a hard time with our New York producer, getting you. I said, screw this. I wanted to do this myself. So I'm going to make sure. So I'm actually sitting in my car in the parking lot recording this show.
No, that's fine. I think the speaker on my phone is a little screwy, but that's fine. So anyway, as long as you can hear me, that's more important. It doesn't matter because nobody's listening on my end. So Wrongful Conviction.
Crystal clear here.
Yeah. So Wrongful Conviction. Let's talk about this. So we're launching on October 4th, which is International Wrongful Conviction Day. It's the 3rd annual one. And we'll be also promoting it extensively with wonderful partners like Spotify and iTunes, and we're in discussions with other major partners that will be announced shortly, which I think is going to be, there's going to be another launch in December when we'll be releasing the webisodes, which will be additional footage and be obviously a video component to it. But the audio footage, I'm extremely proud of the way it's come out. I'm extremely proud of the exonerees themselves who have been able to share their stories of their what we call experience, strength, and hope. And I think that, you know, if people tune in, they're going to be you're not going to be able to stop thinking about what you hear for a while, because it really is. They're the most remarkable stories ever written, and they didn't have to be written because these people actually lived them.
Now, one of the things that you're doing in conjunction with this is people download the podcast within the first 5 weeks of the show. You guys are donating $1 of that to the Innocence Project to help exonerees and their families.
Right. So I pledged to give $1 million to the Innocence Project to launch the show, and I wanted to do it in a way where people could feel involved. So we're working with a company called Empathy, which is, you know, like amplify your empathy. And right. There's a guy named Brian Sergis who runs that, who's terrific. And so he's putting together a plan, which we'll announce shortly, which is going to involve, you know, if there's different action steps that the audience can take, whether it's a tweet or a retweet or a post or a download or a stream or whatever it is, one way or another, it's all going to add up to me giving money every time one of those action steps is taken. And I'm hoping that we'll get enough engagement from the audience that I'll be able to get up to $1 million, which is my goal to give away. And I think we're going to do it from October till the end of the year. And then if we haven't reached the goal by then, I'll probably extend it, because I want to, you know, I mean, I want to give the money away, but I want to, like I said, I want people to have some involvement, and I'm hoping that people may decide to give some money of their own to add to that total, so we can get more people out of it.
Make sure that we have that. You know, the Hype Magazine wants to support that 100%. You have me, the editor-in-chief. I am 100% behind getting people benefits that they need. You know, part of this is, of course, going to, you know, help them pay their bills, help them just, you know, come back into society, and without some of the bitter beer face that everybody else has, you know, monthly. They have a hard enough transition just coming out of that situation back into the general communities and being functional, and their lives have changed. So it's really important that we do all we can as a community to help. And so definitely we want to support that. So I want to make sure that we have your marketing stuff. Yeah. We can't give you $1 million, but I can give you $1 million worth of exposure. So
okay, we love that. So yeah, and my trusty assistant Jenna is sitting here with me now, and she's going to make sure that we get you all the information on the details of the giveaway. And we would love to have the magazine involved, have you involved in helping us promote that, and getting the word out there would be a bullseye as far as I'm concerned. So we will get you that information as soon as Brian gets it to us, which I'm hoping is going to be in the next, you know, week or so. We'll have that all formulated. So
we get 9 million headline impressions a month through our portal, and I'm going to make sure that each and every time there's something special to say about the Innocence Project, about wrongful convictions, that it gets splashed on the homepage of the Hype Magazine. So, yeah,
that's incredible, and I cannot thank you enough for that. I think listen, you've been doing some great stuff in this area as well, and it's again, I mean, it takes all of us. You know what I mean? Like, I can't do it, you can't do it, nobody can do it unless we all push it up there. Like I said, push the snowball up the hill together. But I think every one of these stories that gets out there, the most powerful thing in all of this is the people themselves. And when they talk about how, you know, what they've been through, it's really hard to just sit there and go, all right, well, whatever. I think I'm going to go, you know, go take a walk or, go get a milkshake. Like, you kind of got to listen to it and go, holy fucking shit, this is the craziest stuff ever, and I don't want this to happen to anybody else. And the exonerees don't want it to happen to anybody else. That's really what's motivating them to come in here. I mean, these guys don't really necessarily want publicity or anything else. They want to share their stories. I believe it's cathartic for them to a certain extent to be able to talk about what they've been through. And moreover, they really care that other people don't get subjected to the same thing that happened to them. And it's crazy, too. Like, I don't think people talk about this that much, but one of the things that blows me away is if you convict the wrong person, you stop looking for the right person every time.
Exactly.
And that person, in a lot of our cases, almost 50% of our cases in which we've, at the Innocence Project, exonerated the innocent guy, we've also gotten a DNA hit, which identified the real perpetrator, which we then, of course, turn over to the authorities so they can go get him off the streets, or maybe he's in prison already for something else that he did. So, yeah, that's just another aspect of this that needs to be fixed. And I think we need prosecutorial integrity, which is something that's being worked on. I mean, it's the only job in the country where there's no downside to doing a terrible job. Like, you could just be wrong 100% of the time and keep your job and actually get promoted. There's no liability, there's no accountability. Prosecutors don't like prosecuting other prosecutors. So at the end of the day, I mean, what job do you get where you get promoted for doing it wrong? I mean, like, I don't, it's hard to think of one, right?
Yeah, I can't think of one. I mean, it's amazing.
Right,
There's a prosecutor in South Carolina who, one of you, maybe you've covered this guy. South Carolina guy got exonerated after 15, 20 years or something like that. Capital case. The prosecutor had the exculpatory evidence and he hid it. This person is out, and the governor of the state says, well, he's been on hundreds of capital cases, and, the fact that he did this, they didn't even censor this guy. So he's still working as a prosecutor in South Carolina, and it's crazy. Also in South Carolina, the freaking indictments are being signed by a woman who's been dead for 11 years, but she's the grand jury foreman. They're still using her name. These are things that are really going on, and the system is not designed to protect the innocent. The system now has evolved to protecting the government as opposed to the rights of the individual.
No, you're absolutely right. And, and the truth is, I'm a record executive. If I didn't have hits, I'd get fired. I know if your magazine, nobody was reading it, you'd get fired. These guys have the most important job, right? And it's interesting because in the criminal justice system, the prosecutors have all the power. People think the judges have power, the defense lawyers have power. The prosecutors have all the power. The prosecutors can drop the charges against anybody at any time they want to. They can make deals. They can let you plead down. They can offer you a better sentence. They can threaten you with a harsher sentence if you don't cooperate or if you don't plead guilty. Now we have 96% of people pleading guilty because these crazy fucking mandatory minimum laws. So a prosecutor comes to you and goes, hey, listen, you're looking at like 40 years here with all these mandatories that could stack up, but I'm just going to offer you like a year. All you got to do is plead guilty. And if you're innocent of something, but how badly the system is stacked against you, like Brian Banks, right? I mean, Brian Banks was in that situation, and his lawyer said to him, look, you're better off. I mean, we probably lose if we go to trial because they got the odds stacked against you. And he was as innocent as anybody could be, and he took a deal because he had no choice. He didn't want to get 25 years to life. He started this 5 years, got out, and 6 years later proved that he was innocent, and now he's doing great, and he's a great guy. But I mean, that's another system. The prosecutors have all the power, and that's why I think one of the most important issues is that we have prosecutorial integrity and prosecutorial accountability. Because until we do, guys like the guy you're talking about in South Carolina are just going to do whatever they want, and everything's going to be fine. And they're going to go home and have a nice dinner. They go to sleep. They get up. They do whatever they do. It doesn't seem to bother them, which blows me away. but it'll bother them if they get fired or if they get locked up themselves, which is what I believe should happen. You know, it's like John Thompson, my friend John Thompson, who was sentenced to death and came within a month of being executed and then was exonerated 14 years later. You know, his thing was he wrote an article in the Times and he said, an op-ed piece, he said, I don't understand why the prosecutor isn't being charged with attempted murder. He knew I was innocent. We've proven that he knew I was innocent, and yet he was ready to send me to death. Sounds to me like attempted murder. I mean, that's in New Orleans, which is, you know, hell. But that's the side of it. So anyway, where by the way, where are you based? When are we going to get together? It sounds like we need to get together for a drink.
Yeah, it sounds like we need to bring you on to the network show that I'm doing.
Hell yeah, I'm ready for that.
Oh yeah, this is crazy. We have a deal. We broadcast right now on the CW on Sundays for 30 minutes, but we also just signed a television broadcast deal with U2 America as part of the Real Hip Hop Network for a 2-hour block. Where are you at? New York? I have office in Atlanta. Right now, I'm in Atlanta for an extended period. I have a client out here that we're working and developing, so I'm here to handle that for a month or so. We have an office in Los Angeles, office in New York. Of course, we were hoping to get you in studio in New York, but things just weren't working out the way we wanted them to. And I got kind of frustrated, and I said, "Fuck this! I'm going to take this now." This is something that I really care about personally. And so Atlanta, New York, LA, you can find us anywhere. I mean, I can come to New York at some point this year. I would love to meet you. You know, I'd like to talk about not just, you know, the Innocence Project, but the amazing job you've done over at Lava Records and, you know, kicking off as the A&R guy for Atlantic and then developing.
Yeah, we're dropping some more heat right now, so get ready.
I'm ready. I haven't received any press stuff, but I know I'll be on your press list now to get what's coming out of Lava. You know, now that you're in there with your joint venture now with Universal now, right? Republic Records, exactly. Republic Universal. Okay, so
exactly.
Yeah. We could get it in, man. We could get it in for Lava, but like I said, I'm going to commit. We'll give you $1 million worth of advertising rights and coverage on our portals. We'll match that for this specific situation, the Innocence Project and wrongful convictions.
That's incredible. Everybody, you heard it right here. $1 million coming our way in free advertising for the Innocence Project, for the podcast Wrongful Conviction. What can I say? I really don't even have the right words to say. I mean, that's going to be so helpful. I think your audience is the perfect audience for, you know, you have people who are smart, who are interested, who are aware, and who are becoming more and more aware every day of these problems. And so I think this podcast will really open their eyes up to a whole nother layer of insanity, and in a way that I think, you know, look, as we've been taping this podcast, almost every time we do it, I get the chills, and I know the stories. I know the fucking stories. I know that's why I invite these guys in the first place, because I know their stories. I've been friends with them. I know them personally. I've heard them. I've had dinner. But yet, when they tell the stories in the type of granular detail, you know, we had this guy on the other day that I was telling you about, and he was telling me how when he was arrested for the murder of his wife, which they knew he was innocent, they hid all the evidence. He says to the arresting officer, "Why are you doing this?" And this was 3 months after the crime. He says, "You know I'm innocent." And the guy says to him, and he says, "Why are you doing this to my kids?" And the guy says to him, "Fuck you, fuck your kids, and fuck your dead wife." He says, "I didn't tell that bitch to get murdered in my town." And he says, "And by the way, I know you're innocent, but I really don't care. I got a family to feed. I got a case to solve. We can't find the other guys, so you're it. We don't like all this pressure you're putting on us." So they framed him, and this was a case where they framed him, and they told him they were framing him, like right up front. And it's like, and he still was powerless against the system. And this was a guy who was a middle-class guy who had access to good lawyers, who had everything else. But when they hide the evidence, what the fuck are you supposed to do? right? I mean, like, there's really not much you can do. So, yeah, I mean, that's the type of thing. I mean, when you hear that on the show and you just sit there and go, what country do I live in again? Because it doesn't sound like America to me, motherfucker. I don't know. So anyway, yeah.
I love this conversation.
It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. I can't picture it. And this is a guy. I mean, this is a guy. He's a good friend of mine. I mean, he's a guy who looks like, you know. I mean, he just looks like just a normal American guy. Like if you were going to paint a picture of a guy who lives in the suburbs in America, and like who you would see at the country club having lunch or something like that, that would be this guy. And this guy was in Angola prison for 14 years on a chain gang. And you're sitting there going, because they framed him. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. It's no joke. Google him when we hang up. Doug DeLosa. Unfucking believable. DILOSA. So I'm gonna have to wrap up because actually I have to go to the studio for the podcast at noon. Is there more? Is there more that you need from me? Should we?
Nope. This is beautiful, and we will reconvene. I think what I would like to do. I know that you have a series, but and you have that issue, but I would like to open up space online so we can get rapid response on some things. So I'm inviting you, as you have particular things, let's do an update once a month or something through the Hype Magazine site, and then our quarterly, we print again in December, so let's look towards getting something in the print edition. Our deadline will be November 1st, and let's do a feature story on it, because this is bullshit, and I'm tired of the legal fluffery, and I'm glad that there's somebody that's more powerful, more connected than I am. I'm just an editor, the magazine's great. We're powerful too, but we have a responsibility as aware people, wide awake people, to throw an alarm clock in the graveyard and wake the dead, so to speak. As to this.
Well, let's do it. I like that. I like the way it sounds. Okay, so what should I do?